Hi, thanks for joining me. I'm Eddie Perlberg, and today we're going to be taking a look at Unreal Studio. Now, for those that don't know me, I've been a design visualization and media and entertainment artist, representative of software, and actually been a part of the development process for many, many years. And now with Epic Games, I am a technical specialist in the Unreal Engine Enterprise division. And it is my pleasure to show you all the great things that we've been working on. So what are we going to cover today? Well, I'll introduce you to Unreal Studio. We'll take a look at all the individual components that it comprises. We'll take a look at exporting a 3ds Max file with Datasmith, one of the pieces, and then we'll import it directly into the Unreal Engine. We'll also do a CAD file directly into Unreal, and then we'll go ahead and take a look at the future of Unreal Studio and the enterprise team and let you know some of the shorter and longer term future benefits that we'll be working on. So before we begin, let's just let you know that portions of today's presentations have been pre-recorded. We recognize that your time is valuable and wouldn't want to waste it with any kind of technical difficulties or anything like that. So we do everything we can to give you the best presentation possible. Now, while you're in the chat room, and be sure to fill out the polls because they help us determine direction for our webinars in the future. Of course, while in the chat room, be very respectful and let's all just have a great time while we're looking at this. But if you actually have a question, please use the question button, and you access that by going into the chat window and using the pull down. You can go ahead and change your message from just regular chat to a QA. That'll actually bring it up into a separate part of our interface, and we'll either try to answer it right away or we may answer it later on as we'll be doing Q&A at the end. So if your question requires maybe a little bit of more than what we can actually type in, we'll go ahead and use it at the end. But then after the webinar is all over, you will be sent an email with links to the replay. Go ahead and forward those to friends and family, anyone you think they would be interested in seeing all the benefits that are Unreal Studio. And in that email will also be a link to the survey. And please promise me you'll go ahead and fill that out honestly and subjectively. What we're really looking for is your input to make sure that we know that the webinars are on track. And speaking of future webinars, be sure to mark May 17th on your calendar. That will be the next webinar that we have in our series. So we're looking for great ideas as far as what we can present for you for that. So one of the questions we get often asked is, why Unreal? Well, first, it's our legacy. With over 18 years as a premium award-winning real-time engine, we're noted for realism and the amazing looks that we can provide. We have a team dedicated around the world to working on what we call the enterprise division of Unreal Engine. And what we do is we actually focus in on everything that is not game related. So visualizations, automotive, aerospace, whatever industry you're in outside of the creation of a video game, that falls into the enterprise division. We are everywhere with over 3 million users worldwide. The sun never sets on the Unreal Engine. But what that means is that there's just a ton of resources that you can draw on to, help you along the way. And it's free, so you can go ahead and download, use it for learning, creation. And the good news is that the Unreal Studio agreement now takes care of 100% of a royalty-free license. So you're all taken care of when it comes to Unreal Studio. So what is it? Well, when you look at architecture, it really is a frictionless workflow for visualization artists, giving you just a great entry into using your design data directly for visualization purposes. And the same thing is true for those of you who are in manufacturing. So again, just making that process much easier for you. So Unreal Studio is, just so you're aware, more than just Datasmith. It's a subscription-based benefit that's tied to your login. It's currently in open beta, so you go and sign up. You'll get an email immediately. You had to wait for a while before, but now you're right in and you're using it. And its features and benefits that go along with the Unreal Engine. So to be clear, Unreal Studio is not different from the Unreal Engine. It is a part of and benefits that go along with it. So we'll take advantage of that moving forward. So here is really what Unreal Studio basically boils down to. It is workflow benefits, it is learning benefits, support benefits, and assets that go along with your subscription. So as a part of the beta, you'll be getting all access to all of these, and then moving forward, we'll continue to grow all of the aspects of what is the Unreal Studio offering. So you go ahead and sign up for it at unrealengine.com/studio. So that's right here. And if that'll take you to this page. Now, if you're already signed in and logged in, you can go ahead and just download Unreal Studio. Now, if you're brand new to the process, you can go ahead and see it in action here, and then just sign up for the beta at this point so that, again, you'll log in and that'll take you to this page so that you can go ahead and download Unreal Studio by using this button, and that'll get you to the launcher. And then inside the launcher, you go ahead and download or install the engine. We'll take a look at that in just a second. For those of you who are using 3ds Max, you go ahead and get your exporter plugin here. So currently 3ds Max is the software that has a direct exporter that we're going to take a look at in just a minute. But that's the install page. And then once you've gone ahead and installed, this is a version of the launcher. And you can see that I am currently at this screen grab installing the software. So it's at about 33%. You'll see that I have access to or notification of that my Unreal Studio beta is active. So that gives me all of the tools that are in here. So as the engine installs, it continues to install, and once it's done, it will also go ahead and install the Datasmith plugins for it. So you can check that out by clicking on here, and you can see that after the install, it's now a part of my installation process. And before I went any further, I made sure that I also installed the Substance plugin, and you'll see why that's important in just a little bit. But you can see that directly inside of the launcher, you can have access to getting the 3ds Max exporter. So if you didn't get it on the first page or you need it later on, don't worry, you can always get it here. And you can always access the learning, documentation, and support that we talked about directly from the launcher as well. So the launcher will be your home base for everything Unreal Studio. So let's go ahead and take a look at using the different components, and we'll start with the workflow. And what we're going to do today is I have a couple of different scenarios. One is architectural, and one would be manufacturing. And we're going to take a quick look at how we use Unreal Studio to make those processes much easier. We'll start with the architectural process. And what I did was I gave myself 2 days for each of those scenarios, the architectural and manufacturing. I said, what can I accomplish in 2 days to make something very compelling? And so we'll start with the architectural workflow. And that actually starts in 3ds Max. So I'll see you there in just a sec. So here we are in Autodesk 3ds Max 2018. Currently, Datasmith is supported for 3ds Max 2016, 2017, and 2018. Thanks to our friends at TurboSquid for providing us with the model that you see here, this city loft. Now, this particular asset is set up to be utilizing V-Ray rendering. And V-Ray is the most used rendering technology in 3ds Max. So you can see that currently we have lots of V-Ray components like cameras, lights. We also are utilizing IES lights here in the scene. All of the objects that you're seeing are painted with V-Ray materials. This one is really V-Rayed up. So one of the things that makes Datasmith so compelling is that it doesn't require you to change your workflow. If you've gone ahead and created this for what would be imagery, to render out, well, then you can take that same data and use it in the Unreal Engine for creating an interactive asset as well. So how do we do that? Well, the process is very straightforward and simple. Simply coming to the export option, we'll go ahead and call this webinar. So webinar. And rather than the traditional, what would you call file formats that you've used in the past, here you can see because we installed the Datasmith Exporter for 3ds Max, we can go ahead and take advantage of that. So we'll go ahead and save that. We're going to grab all the visible objects. The other option would be to make a selection and save those out. But you can see that the dialog box for this is very straightforward. So while that's going out and saving, let's go ahead and back to our presentation and talk about more of what is Unreal Studio. So while that's cooking in the background, and it'll only take a minute or two, but I thought I would take this opportunity to really introduce you to what the Datasmith can do for you. Beyond 3ds Max, it really does allow you to take data from your design environments, whether they're Rhino, SolidWorks, Inventor. Over 20 CAD formats are now being able to read through Datasmith and bring that data into the Unreal Engine. So we'll take a look at some of the other file formats in just a little bit, but what it really gives you is this high fidelity translation, not only of the geometry, because we had a lot of that before, but it also includes now the materials, the lights, cameras, metadata, scene structure, all of that stays the same, so you'll feel very comfortable in the Unreal Engine with your assets. It allows you to use proven techniques to optimize, organize, fill holes, find the small parts that really clog up or give you a big file. You can grab all those, and all of that is repeatable so that you don't have to start over each and every time. Another benefit to the Datasmith portion of your Unreal Studio subscription is the fact that you can go ahead and re-import any changes that happen to the design data. So we'll take a look at doing that in just a little bit. If you were to ask anybody what Datasmith really does for the process, many people are just calling it simply magic. So we'll see how that works in just a little bit. I can see that our file is done in the background. It was actually done quite a while ago, but let's take a look at using it now inside of the Unreal Engine. So here we are back in the Epic launcher. We'll go ahead and launch Unreal Engine. And from there, we're going to go ahead and open up a project, a new one, and import our Datasmith file that we just saved out of 3ds Max. So from this interface, we could go ahead and open up some projects that already exist on this machine. But instead, I'm going to come over here to New Projects and utilize the Unreal Studio tab to access either a blank template, which has really nothing more than the sun and sky, really nothing beyond that. But instead, I'm going to utilize the product viewer. And the product viewer is set up to be more specific in creating visualizations utilizing design data. So we'll just call this the webinar 01. That'll be the project. This is where it's saving it. And then we'll go ahead and just simply hit create. So here is our project opened up, and we won't have a chance to really go through all of the different components of what you see if this is the first time you're seeing Unreal Engine for the very first time. But I do want to point out that there are a number of components that are already built into this file. So not only the text and the sample sphere that you see here, but also the skylight is here, the post-processing volume. We'll talk about what these do in a little bit. And so on. So this blue arrow that you saw in front of us there, that's where when we hit the play option, that's where our game is going to start, and the arrow points at what we're looking at. So we'll take advantage of that in just a little bit. But right now what we need is our model in here. So I'm going to simply go to our import Datasmith option and go over to where we save that particular file. You might remember here in the export folder, here is webinar, and I'll go ahead and hit open. Here it asks me where I'd like to save the geometry, materials, and so on. I have a folder already in my template called import your model here or product viewer logic. Well, something tells me that this is the place to put it. Now, the only real options that we have here are geometry, materials, lights and cameras, and then if we pull this down, the ability to change the resolutions of our light mass. And those are all covered in classes that are available to you in the learning section. So we won't go through what a light mass is today, but that sounds like maybe something we could do in a future webinar. So while this data is coming in, why don't we go back over to our presentation and take a look at another component of what is available to us with Unreal Studio. So while that file is importing in the background, let's take a look at the next level of our subscription benefits, and that is the learning. Here on the learning page, you can see that there are a number of tutorials that are directly and specifically created for our industries to give us a head start and an accelerated jump start to success utilizing Unreal Engine. So here you're going to find classes on not only data prep and how to prepare your geometry for the best performance, but also things like light mass and lighting techniques. If I needed to create an interior walkthrough from A to Z and a complete class of all the things that I need to really take advantage of. So the learning aspect is here for you. This particular, all these courses will not only grow as far as the number of them, but we're constantly going back and updating each of them so that it always has the latest material. So the learning aspects are really going to make a big difference in how you utilize the Unreal Engine, and all of that is a benefit of Unreal Studio. So here we are back in the Unreal Engine, and full disclosure, it took about 4.5 minutes on my Z4, my HP Z4 to bring all of that data into the engine using Datasmith. As you can see now, our webinar folder now contains geometry, materials, and textures, as well as the IES lights file sources that were used, and this Datasmith scene import icon. If in fact any changes were ever made to the original file, I can come here, right click and go re-import, and that'll give me the option of bringing in whatever changes have happened since then. And you might be asking, well, where is the loft? It's right over there. So we'll get over there in just a minute. But before we leave this area, I'm just going to follow the instructions to connect the some of the components that have been built in for us to the geometry we just brought in. So utilizing the product viewer tools, I'm going to go down to the product viewer section, and here I'm going to, since we're creating kind of a fly around, walk around, I'm going to change it from orbit mode, which is really great for product development. We'll take a look at that in a little bit, to fly mode. And then after that, we'll just go ahead and add in what is the component that we would like to be the interactive element to it. So we'll go to the interactive route. You can see that there's already one in here, and we'll just pull the list down and find our webinar route. So now we've connected those together, so many of the automatic or capable features of VR will automatically be connected. So now that we have all of that done, let's go over to our city loft over here. The only thing that I'm going to do before we leave is I'm going to take the game starter. This is the position when we hit play, where that camera position goes, and we're going to move it over into the loft area. So just positioning that over here and just zing. Come on. So you get the idea. So the only other thing that I need to do now is over here in the actual loft itself, I need to just go ahead and take a few minutes and, get us closer. So the reality is Datasmith gets us 95% of the way there, but there are some things that we still need to pay attention to and polish. So let me give you an example. You can see that I need to adjust the lights a little bit, and let's go into this mirror. Now, one of the things that the materials that are coming over from that particular software, there's an element to in the Unreal Engine that is not apparent or there for in here that is not there, but it is here. And that would be this component or this element of metallic. So all of the materials inside the Unreal Engine have this level or this value that is metallic. And if we go ahead and just pull off of that and give a constant, the metallic value really is meant to be I am metallic or I am not metallic. You'll see people that have put in gray values in here, and the reality is that really doesn't do a lot as far as the benefit of metallic. So 0 is I am not metallic, 1 is I am metallic, and you can see that by now turning that on, I get a much more mirror-like environment. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a few minutes, go through the material lists and set those up, adjust the lights, and be back with you in just a few. So here we are back in our city loft. It's been about 2.5 hours and I've been working on materials. I've adjusted the IES lights. I've put in some of these spheres, these reflection spheres to capture and project reflections into our stainless steel and our chrome with very little impact on performance. So putting these into your scene will really help out a lot. I've also gone ahead and made the light bulbs emissive, so the material that is being put onto the light bulbs is now generating a light source as well. The last thing I wanted to do is I wanted to do something with the wall and behind, in the loft area up here. And what I'm going to do is, or actually, as you can see, it already kind of looks amazing, is let me show you what I did. Is I came here to our substance source. This is a plugin that I installed. And because I'm here and I'm an Unreal Studio subscriber, I now have access to over 100 different materials at no additional cost that I can take advantage of. So let me go ahead to my assets. You can see here are some of the materials that I've used through the course of this webinar. And in order to get to be able to use one of these, we'll simply grab it, and here are how it actually looks. Here are the components that it's made up of, and then we go ahead and simply download. And what it'll do is it'll put all of those elements directly into our materials folder, and so that if I wanted to utilize that, I simply drag and drop that right here onto the wall. And if we get up really close, you can see that it really does look like a textured wall. So just amazing as far as all the things you can do with the substance materials. So now that we've gone ahead and done all that, let's back up just a little bit. What do you say we play? So I'm going to go ahead and hit the play button here. That takes us to the start, and now we can start to move around our space. Now, again, I'm really wishing that we had a VR setup so that we could take advantage of that. Maybe that's something we can talk about in another webinar in the very near future. But you can see that all of the materials that were assigned to us in our 3ds Max file have come over. We've polished them up and brightened them up a little bit so they look amazing. And really, like I said before, I gave myself 2 days to create this kind of an asset that we could show to the customer. And it looks like if I accomplish that in about 2.5 hours. So it's looking pretty amazing. I can use the rest of my time to be either more creative and do some maybe different scenarios within this particular file, or we can go ahead and start moving on to something else. But for this particular scenario, it looks like 2.5 hours is all we needed. Before we go on to our next scenario, let's go ahead and talk about one of the other features and benefits of Unreal Studio, and that is the aspect of support. Now, very often support is dismissed as something that is a nice to have, but I don't really need it. Well, here when it comes to support inside of Unreal Studio, you're really getting a lot of support. Not only are we giving you access to specific knowledge bases, but we're also giving you access to the Unreal Studio discussion boards and ticketing so that you can either find your searches quickly or you can go ahead and have discussions, and these are moderated by the support team, so you'll always get a very clear answer to what you need. And if it goes beyond that, you can go ahead and submit a ticket so that your answer is always there for you. So here is the support page. You can see you can access the different components here. And then if you go to the create a case page, it allows you to fill out the information you need so that you can get the answers that you're looking for. So it is quite extensive, a lot of articles to look at, and then of course the ability to always submit a question as you need it. This time importing CAD data directly into the Unreal Engine using Datasmith. So here we are again at our new project interface. We're going to go back to the Unreal Studio tab and again use the product viewer. We'll call this webinar number 2. And create. So now back in the product viewer template, we're going to, instead of importing a Datasmith file, we're going to drop this down and say import a CAD file. So you can see that the list here of the different file formats goes right off the page. So let me see if I can bring that in again. So here are all the 20 different file formats that you can utilize bringing this data in. And when we get to the future, we'll talk more about that list in just a little bit. But let's go ahead and find our wind generator and bring that in. So here's our wind generator file. You can see that it was created in Rhino. So again, thanks to our friends at TurboSquid for providing us with the data that we're using here. Again, the steps are the same as our architectural assets. We'll go ahead and put those in the import model here part. Again, we'll go ahead and determine if there are lights. We'll turn those off. Cameras we won't need at this point. We're really looking for the geometry and the materials. So we'll go ahead and import that file format directly into our product viewer. Now I know that these wind generators can be quite large, whether they're hundreds of meters or hundreds of feet tall. It made it a little bit unruly for me to utilize this in its natural state. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead to the generator itself and shrink it down a little bit so that it's a little bit more manageable. So like 1/100th its size. So oops. Now, of course, we want those to be all the same numbers so it doesn't get skewed. So that makes it considerably, if we take and delete our little asset here, that makes it considerably much easier to use. And maybe that's a little small, but you get the idea that I can go ahead and make adjustments to this. And if anything were to change in the design of this, again, I can right click and re-import that directly in. So what are we going to do with our wind generator? Well, let's for this particular scenario, there are 2 assets that we would like to do. We'd like to show the clients, the city that's actually purchasing these, how they're going to look in a wind farm. And then secondly, we'd like to do a design review. So I'm going to go ahead again and use the product viewer tools. This time we're going to use orbit mode so that as we pick objects, we'll be able to orbit around them. And we're going to go ahead and again add that our asset, our wind generator to the tool. So now all of those elements will have, as we pick on objects, they will have the different components accessible to orbit around. So having done that, let's go ahead and move the design forward just a little bit. So now what you're seeing are 3 different versions of that same wind generator. And what I've done in this particular view is I've gone ahead and put them into motion. So you'll see that when we hit the play button, they now move. And just like what I was really looking to do is create 3 different versions of that so that they looked very similar to an actual wind farm, how different generators are moving at different speeds. So how did I do that? Well, I actually used a programming language inside of Unreal Engine called Blueprints. And so let me show you a blueprint. So what I did for this particular event, during the play of the game or our real-time event, every time there's a moment, so they call it a tick or a frame, what I'd like to do is have the blades, so I imported the blades, rotate. So I grabbed a rotate, and you can see that for every frame or every tick of moment, it's going to rotate a half a degree. So created three of those, and some would argue that you certainly could do that all in one blueprint and have variables that would adjust those. That would be great, but what I wanted for this particular scenario was the ability to adjust individually as I built the farm so that it would look very natural. So I didn't want a lot of them all similar in the same space. So that's how you go ahead and create a blueprint, and we're going to get into much more depth when it comes to blueprints in other webinar series in the future. So here's our blueprints. Then I created a level that would be the actual wind farm. So no, we won't save that. So here you can see that I've gone ahead and placed or spaced out a number of different wind generators. I've deleted in this particular level the fog so that we could see the sky in the background. I've placed a light mass importance volume in here so that it again focuses all the calculations of our lighting in that box so that we're not, if you look over there, there's lots and lots of stuff to calculate, but that doesn't matter. So we just wanted it to be in this box. So now if we go ahead and hit play, you'll see that, again, some are moving quickly, some are moving very slowly. So this is the exact look that I wanted to generate. Now we just need to make it look a little bit more natural. So what we did here is we went over to the terrain option and laid out a terrain. So we have to stop the game in order to play with our terrains. Again, that's the start arrow, so that's expected. So what I did was, you'll see that in the terrain tool, I can go ahead and start sculpting. So this is far too strong. Let's go ahead and drop that down to like 0.1. And so by just simply scrubbing on our hills, you can see that we're building up those in the background. Cool. So that's looking more and more natural. The last thing I want to do is start to add what would be more of a natural look to it so that it doesn't have this shiny reflective floor on it. So let's go back to our substance source and see if there's anything that would really fit this scenario. It's been a little while, so I'm going to have to log back in again. And here you can see, if we go back to our Unreal Studio assets, there are a number of different natural looks that we can access. So here are some grasses coming in just a moment, metallics, woods. So here is a pattern grass. This is something that would look like the outfield in a soccer field or a baseball stadium. Here's a countryside, and there are, again, over 100. But what we're going to utilize is this countryside. And so again, downloading it to our materials library and applying it to our terrain. So click on our terrain and simply slide it over and apply. So it'll take just a moment to compile that in the background. But then the next thing we're going to need is, let's put some foliage on there to kind of break that up a little bit. So in order to do foliage, what I did was I went to another project and I actually migrated some foliage out of it into this one. So you can see that I now have access to that. So I put it right here in our contents folder. Foliage, let's do some grass. We'll come over here to the foliage area aspects and we'll just take this and drop it up into here. Now with this in here, we can go ahead and make some adjustments, but we'll just we'll leave it as free. And so what it'll do is it'll make high and low ones. And then we start to just paint the grass in our our scene here. The same thing can be done with trees and other assets that we want to put into our scene. The last thing you'll see is up here, you can see that I've got some birds. And again, I went into another free project that is available up on the marketplace and downloaded that. And I simply migrated those particles over into our scene here. So let me show you how you can actually migrate assets from one project to another. So let's go back to our materials. So here are just some of the materials that are associated with those birds. I right click on this particular folder and I say migrate. And what this will do is it'll collect up all the elements that are necessary to recreate that in another project. I say yes. Oh, I'm sorry, that was a save. So here are all the objects that are required to reproduce these materials in another project. I say yes, thank you. And then it asks, well, what other project do you want me to put that into? And so I find the content folder of another project and I drop them right in, drag and drop the particles right in here, and you can see that we already we have a great look. So again, making it much more natural and easy to do. So let's go back to our levels. Let me show you the final build of this particular project. And again, put that into motion so that we can get a sense of how this plays. So the grass blowing in the breezes, our wind farm is generating, the clouds moving in the background, far more interactive than just a still image. Now in another project where you're going to utilize the exact same CAD data here in this project, but maybe perhaps for a design review. So I kind of thought, how can we actually present this in an interactive way that might be interesting or compelling as far as a design review is concerned? So here is the component that makes up the generator itself. And I thought, how about as we approach, it will actually reveal itself more and more to the review process. So here you can see we'll strip away the outer shell, and as we come closer, we can start to see more and more of the components within. Again, utilizing a lot of the materials from other projects to give to give it that compelling look. But again, I wanted it to just be kind of something that would just be interesting to look at. And then again, if we were to go, because I use the orbit process here, again, you can see that it's orbiting nicely around those objects. So again, another way of approaching it, could we create interfaces that would do that same work? Yes, but I just wanted to show you something, again, very interactive that would, again, show different ways of presenting data. So finishing out the different components of what is Unreal Studio, that leaves us with the assets. And again, to remind you, it's the industry templates that really allow you to accelerate your success inside the Unreal Engine, and the substances that continue to make your projects look more and more compelling. And the good news about the assets is this list will continue to grow throughout time. So it'll continue to be a focus of ours to give you compelling elements that are necessary for your success. But that brings up an interesting topic. What about the future? Well, for those that have downloaded the 3ds Max exporter and installed that, you saw that right there on the web page, we have a space already set up for those of you who will be using SketchUp. So that is currently under development. We expect to have that very shortly. Don't forget, additional fixes to the Unreal Engine benefit all of us. So we're all using the same technology. And as a beta participant, you have access to those discussion boards that we talked about earlier. So you can talk to the development teams about, when we can expect additional exporters and importers and translators and those kinds of things. Now, be sure to understand that some translators are more involved than others, depending on the level of SDKs and APIs and all that other stuff that is necessary for development in order to get that successful for you. But I can assure you that if it's important to you, it's important to us. So we are looking at all of those things. One other aspect that you might be interested in is if you again go to the Unreal Engine page under the resources pull down, you have direct access to the roadmap. So you can see what is currently being worked on for the engine as well. So again, a lot of resources available to you for the future. For those of you who are wondering about a specific package, again, if it's important to you, it's important to us, and it'll be coming along in the very near future. So the good news is we're still in beta, and the better news is that we are committed to this process for your success. So what other questions do you have? I see we're quickly running out of time here, so let's go ahead and head over to the Q&A board and start answering some of your questions there.